I love classic books. I do like classic books. And not only that, but I do love making lists as well. And if I can combine the two and make a list of classic books, then I'm a happy man. And recently, that's what Kieran at Katie Books did. So he's been making these lists of 10 classic books that you must read, that you should read. And I watched that one and I loved it a lot. And Steve Donahue did a reaction to it. And then Brandon from Brandon's Bookshelf, he did his own kind of version. And I was like, I want to do my own version. So here we are, I'm doing my own version. So yeah, I wanted to do my own version because condensing classic literature down to 10 books is interesting to me. And also because this isn't my 10 favourite classics. This is classics which I'm saying you should read. If you're interested in classic stuff, this is like the books that at some point you should get to. And why should you? Yeah, that word should and must is interesting as well. Because you must read these books because of. You should read these books in order to. So I've tried to answer that for myself. So yeah, so I've chosen these 10 books because these books have had a little bit of influence in Western literature. They have given me a sort of an understanding of classic books surrounding them. And then also just because I enjoyed them. Because they're enjoyable. And some, enjoy is a kind of bit of an umbrella term for lots of things. Like some of them are a bit of a challenge. But we do like a challenge, don't we? So a quick detour into Disclaimer City. I am not an academic or a scholar. I'm not even comparatively... I mean, I've read a few books in my time, but I'm not, I'm not very, very well read. There are massive gaps in my knowledge and in my and in sort of certain time periods. There's certain books which I haven't... key texts that I haven't read. Oh yeah, so these are all works from Western literature. They're all men, apart from one. They're all white, apart from one. And yes, and as I say, these aren't my favourite classic books. Maybe I'll get to that at some point. But these are kind of ones which I feel like, if you're going to read classic works and stuff, then these ones that have helped me in understanding certain things. So let's get on with it, shall we? Now, we're going to start, of course, in antiquity. And I'd love to start with Gilgamesh, but we're not going to do that. I'm not going to include the Bible, even though that is the main source of inspiration for all of Western literature. But we're going to skip that. We're going to take that as a given and skip that. And we're going to go to very, very ancient Greece, and we're going to visit Homer. So there's the two big ones, isn't there, with Homer? And I've chosen the Odyssey. This is the Robert Fagles edition. So yeah, I've chosen this one instead of the Iliad. I mean, first of all, Homer. I mean, everyone references Homer in Greece and Rome, maybe, but everyone references Homer or goes back to Homer or tries to copy Homer. And there's loads of kind of different theories about who he was or who she was or who they, plural, were. There's a myth that he was a blind man and all this sort of stuff. It's not really sort of known for definite. But yes, his influence knows no bounds. And the Odyssey, I mean, the Odyssey is fabulous because it's just... it's a big old romp. It's not what you might think. So if you think of the Odyssey, you might think of like the long journey with lots of monsters and Circe and all that sort of stuff. And yes, that's true for like a third, maybe even less than that. But the main bulk of the book, of the poem, is this kind of revenge plot. This slow, very sort of slow burn, building intention revenge plot, up to the climax, which is just... it's a lot. A lot of blood and guts and stuff. So yes, if you're going to read sort of antiquity stuff, then you do have to get to Homer at some point. So do get to Homer at some point. So a couple of hundred years along the line, we are going to stay in ancient Greece, and we are paying a visit to the Greek tragedians. And with the Greek tragedians, we have, there's three options, I think. There's Aeschylus, Euripides, or Sophocles, and I've gone with Sophocles. And specifically Oedipus the King, or Oedipus Rex. And I've gone with this one just because this play basically has the structure, the basic structure of most other things after it. It's got the three-act structure and the character development, the world building, and it's also, crucially, it's got the plot twist. It's got the reversal. And it's this sort of plot twist and its main kind of characters and everything that Aristotle, further down the line, Aristotle was obsessed with Oedipus, and he basically used it as a framework for what plays and what poems should be like. He's like, this is exactly what plays should be like, and you have to copy this exactly. So yeah, if Aristotle was alive today, he would be doing a 6-part, hour-long each YouTube series, video essay, Lindsay Ellis style, on Oedipus. So yes, and as a play itself to read, it's interesting, and it's kind of, I mean, you've got the stuff, which is all cool, and yeah, you just know that watching it for the first time in ancient Greece, the blokes in the audience, because it always was blokes in the audience, they would have just been like, oh. If you're going to read a Greek tragedy, then Oedipus is the one to do, is the one to read, I think. Okay, number 3, we have a hop, skip and a jump to the Romans now. Now, there's a few options that I could have taken with the Romans, and one of them is, it would have made sense to choose Virgil, just because for what comes later. But I'm not really a fan of the Aeneid, so I've skipped the Aeneid, and I've gone instead for Ovid, the Metamorphoses. So this is an epic poem, and it has a very sort of specific theme. It is about metamorphoses. It's about people and gods and various people, various things, nymphs, who change form into something else. And this is very often in escape for something. It's either escaping something or in punishment for something. Either someone offends one of the gods, and they're like, right, you're going to turn to a spider or something. And very often, this is particularly women who are fleeing nasty men and trying to change into something else in order to evade the clutches of nasty men or gods. And so it's quite dark. I mean, a lot of it is quite dark, and it's quite brutal as well. And the victim punishing as well. There's quite a lot of victim punishing in here from jealous goddesses. But it is fascinating. I really, really found it fascinating. This is quite an old version, as you can see. This is a prose translation, and I think I would prefer a verse translation, of which there are many. Ovid kind of pops up as an influence later on, as we shall see. So yes, people changing into things, and also the other thing about this is that it's not the stories that you would expect. It's not like the big sort of famous stories, although they do feature a little bit. It's very often stories that, for me, I had never heard of. I mean, I haven't studied classics or anything, so maybe they're very, very popular. But yeah, a lot of the stories in here are ones which I had no idea about. So yes, the Metamorphoses. That's the Romans for you. Okay, so now we are, for number 4, we are zooming ahead into the Middle Ages and into the Christian era. So to get a bit of more of a link, then you'd probably read something like St. Augustine, the Confessions, in order to sort of get the link between sort of Roman mythology stuff and then Christianity. But we're skipping that, and we're going straight to the Middle Ages, but we're staying in Italy. Ooh, we're staying in Italy, and yes, here we go. So, the Divine Comedy. So it's interesting talking about Ovid. I mean, Ovid pops up here as a very influential poet. I think there's 4 Greek poets that turn up. Homer, Ovid, or Ovid. I can't remember the other ones. So what's this all about? So this is about Dante and Virgil going into a journey into hell, and then climbing Mount Purgatory. And then Virgil leaves, and then Beatrice takes the reins, and she shows, after admonishing Dante a little bit, she takes Dante into the spheres of heaven, or paradise. And yes, it's pretty... I mean, I think this is quite an important work, but it is difficult. I found this a real challenge. I didn't read this translation to start with. I read the Steve Ellis one. But this is by Alan Mendelbaum. And many people just read Inferno just because it's the most, it's kind of like the most interesting, it's the most sort of gory, and it's very kind of like, whoa. But I would recommend having a go at the other two, like Purgatorio and Paradiso. Even though, I mean, by the time you get to Paradiso, it is so kind of impenetrably hard. So you need a translation with good notes, and you need a translation, you know, which will kind of hold your hand a little bit. But there is something quite rewarding about it. And yes, I mean, Inferno is the most kind of fun, seeing all the sort of nasty tortures and stuff. But I mean, Purgatorio is certainly interesting, and Paradiso is like, ooh, very, very informative video. But yeah, no, I would definitely, definitely recommend taking your time over this and having a go at some point. And this translation is quite good as well. So yes, the supreme masterpiece of Western literature. There we go. So sticking in the Middle Ages, but we are now in England. I've chosen The Canterbury Tales by Chaucer. So with the Canterbury Tales, we are sort of jumping over the Decameron. The Decameron is a work which heavily influenced this, and Boccaccio, who wrote the Decameron, he actually coined the phrase the Divine Comedy for Dante's work. So we're kind of skipping him and going straight to Canterbury Tales. And I've chosen the Canterbury Tales just because it's a major influence for someone major coming up, and also because it just gives a very, very vivid portrayal of middle-age life. It's a ton of characters, different types of characters, different classes, different types of people, they're all on a pilgrimage to Canterbury, and on the way they tell stories to each other. And these stories are often very bawdy, very offensive, very funny, sad, dark. It's just a whole kind of plethora of life. And it's really, really rather fun to read. Particularly, I mean, this is kind of like a translated version from the Middle English, because Middle English is quite difficult for someone like me to understand, so this is sort of valuable. Of course, the wife of Bath is the star of the show. She is the Samantha Jones of the Middle Ages. Its approach to sex and its approach to gender and its approach to various different things is just very, very funny. Yes, I would highly recommend it. So at number 6, we are out of the Middle Ages now, and we are in the Renaissance. And of course, we have to include Shakespeare. Shakespeare!
Young men will do it if they come to it, but can't stay out of blame!
So yeah, Shakespeare, you can't really, you can't step over Shakespeare, really, in terms of all this stuff.
This stuff?
And his plays, I mean, it is kind of like a bad thing, really, because you're taught Shakespeare in English at school, at least in the UK you are. And I was speaking to a colleague at work about this, and she was saying that Shakespeare should be taught in drama, really. It shouldn't really be taught in English. It should be taught in drama, because these are plays to be watched. They're not really plays to be read. And if you are in a stuffy English room as a teenager, then it's kind of like, oh, Shakespeare. The best way to consume Shakespeare is to watch it. But there is certainly much value in reading a Shakespeare play. Because the language is so kind of like, you know. So not only has he kind of coined a lot of phrases that we use nowadays, but there's a lot of kind of stock characters and kind of plot tropes and things that we now use today. And I suppose I should sort of condense it to one. I think I would go with the obvious. I think I would go with Hamlet as a play to read. It is the longest, but it just has everything, really. And I was sort of thinking, well, why is Hamlet so kind of like, ugh? And for actors, I mean, wanting to play Hamlet, it has everything. It's because you have to play grief, you have to play intense grief, you have to play revenge. Obviously, you have the language, you have the very sort of long soliloquies dealing with, you know, the nature of humanity and the nature of life and death and all that sort of stuff. But then also there are funny bits in it, so you do have to be funny in it as well. And then of course there's the stage combat, because you have to, you know, sort of kill and stab and fight with people. So it's sort of everything. But yes, I think definitely read Hamlet with a comedy. I would say maybe Much Ado, or As You Like It. Okay, so we're going to leave the Renaissance for now. There are certain key texts that I'm missing out, like Don Quixote, which is the first sort of major novel. So we're missing that. And we're going into the Age of Enlightenment. Yeah, it's difficult with me with the Age of Enlightenment because works particularly in the 18th century, I need to brush up. I need to there's lots which I need to check off with. in the 18th century. And I was thinking, okay, what sort of book can I recommend which I've read and which I think is worth reading? I was thinking, well, Gulliver's Travels, Robinson Crusoe, Young Sorrows of Werther by Goethe. But I'm skipping all that. And I'm actually going for a non-fiction book. We're going for a memoir, The Interesting Narrative of Olaudah Equiano. So yeah, so this is a memoir. It is what is known as a slave narrative. And I'm recommending this just because this was a big deal back in the day. It was used as a kind of to support the abolitionist movement. And I'm recommending it just because it gives a lot of context to this time. And if you read stuff around this time and into the 19th century, things like Jane Austen and Vanity Fair and all these sort of things where these people in very sort of rich houses and mansions and stuff, a lot of their wealth would have come at that time from plantations in America, or in the Americas, and that of course involves the transatlantic slave trade. And this gives a very brutal and very sort of upfront account of what that actually looked like and what that actually was. And the actual story of this is really fascinating because as far as the memoir is concerned, he was born in what is now Nigeria. He was sent over to the Caribbean and enslaved there. Over the years, he was able to finally buy back his freedom, so he became a free man, and he worked as a sailor, I think, in England. And this sort of just recounts his story, and it's just really kind of fascinating. It's fascinating to see what life was like as a free African person living in England, and the dangers and the risks involved in just getting enslaved again, via various means. It's just really, I recommend it a lot just because it gives a lot of very important context to surrounding stuff that you find in novels around this time. And yes, there is a bit of disagreement about where he actually did come from. So there's some people believe he was actually born in America, but I would still definitely recommend it. So there we go. Okay, in the final 3 books, I've allowed 3 books for the 19th century because the 19th century in terms of classical literature is just like... So I've chosen a Brit, a Russian and an American. And for the Brit, several different options, Dickens and Trollope and even if we're going sort of a bit further back than Jane Austen. But I've chosen a Bronte, and of course I've chosen Jane Flipping Eyre. Am I incapable of love? Jane Flipping Eyre. I've chosen this one just because this, oh man, it's just such a kind of gripping story. This is kind of romanticism, and it's Gothic, and it's scary at times, and it's kind of it's got a great sort of love story in the middle of it. And Jane Eyre as a character is just fabulous. It is kind of subversive, I guess, in terms of gender politics, with what a woman is like, a woman standing up for herself and, not taking any BS. And yeah, it's just, it's really, really fabulous. And as I say, it's got a great, fabulous story, which goes off into loads of different twisty-turny places. And yes, I definitely would recommend it. And I haven't chosen Jane Austen just because I figure if you're reading all these books, you're going to read Jane Austen anyway. But I just think that Jane Eyre specifically has the edge, has sort of the gritty edge over Jane Austen novels, just because it's got more stuff happens in it, and it's very dark at times and brutal and stuff. But it's just the journey is fabulous, and I think Jane Eyre is such a strong, complex character as well. And yes, it's just fabulous. So Jane Eyre. Number 9, The Russians. So yes, and again, a couple of options with the Russians. The 2 main ones are Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, aren't they? And I've sort of tried to think which one would I recommend, and I've gone for Anna Karenina. I've gone with this one. I've gone with this one just because War and Peace is fabulous, as we all know. I feel like Anna Karenina, I enjoyed Anna Karenina a little bit more. So it's basically a split narrative, a little bit. You've got Anna Karenina and you've got Levin. and they kind of do this. Their stories kind of, one sort of achieves great things and one kind of falls from grace. And yes, I mean, the thing I love about Russian literature is it is about life, the very life of life. I mean, my favourite is Brothers Karamazov, but I'm choosing this just because I think this is one that you should read, because it has sort of the key elements of Russian literature in it, which is life, the very life of life, the meaning of life. Very often at the end of these books, there's a very sort of amazing peroration of the meaning of life, and this has that as well. And yes, and this is a very good story as well. There's some fabulous sort of bits in it. So yes, I would choose this one. So there we go. And finally, number 10, we're going over to America, and it's the Great American Novel, and oh my goodness gracious, I have chosen Moby Flipping Dick. Moby Dick, oh my goodness gracious. So, I mean, yeah, this book, you must read this book. This is a tough read. It's an easy sell, because this is, about, the hunting of Moby Dick the whale. It sounds really exciting, and it is exciting in various places, but it does kind of go off into a strange one. So you have Ishmael, call him Ishmael. He likes to be called Ishmael. And he, of course, the first 100 pages are kind of like a really great, 19th century classic novel. You have Ishmael, who goes to become a whaler on this ship. And there's a bunch of other sort of characters here and there. You've got Ahab, who's the captain, who, has got this sort of monomaniacal aim to hunt Moby Dick, this big white whale. And so that's all cool. But once you get out to sea, then things take a narrative and a literary turn, and the book becomes this, like, encyclopedia, this labyrinth of various different things. There's so many small chapters, and everything about whaling and ships is described in the minutest of detail. And it's, in terms of the form of a novel, it just kind of rips everything open, like whaling. It just rips the whole kind of thing apart, until like the very, very end, when you finally do meet Moby Dick. And it's just, in terms of, there's a phrase that's in writing, which content dictates form, and the content, which is, this whaling ship being out in the ocean for, years and years, characters becoming mad, it does sort of dictate the form, and it sort of just blows apart what a novel is. And it's just, it's difficult, but it's very kind of, it's amazing. So there we go. So there we go. Those are my 10 picks for classic books which you must read, if you want. Yes, I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun in sort of choosing these books, and I've had a lot of fun in watching the other videos. Yeah, Kieran, Steve, and Brandon. Yeah, I really love those videos. Kieran's doing more. He's doing modern classics and contemporary classics. I'm going to leave it there for now. But yes, what are your 10 classic books which you think people should read? That'll be very interesting. Let's have a big argument about it, shall we? So yes, thank you for watching if you've been watching, and yes, I shall see you later. Goodbye!